You are listening to part 75 of our series, 7 Medicines, The Wise Woman Way, with Susan Weed at Time Monk Radio. Hello, Susan, and welcome back to Time Monk Radio.
Thank you, Gemini. I hope that you have been once again enjoying your meals and not worrying unduly about things.
Yes, I have.
Dietary modification combined with lifestyle changes is generally enough to eliminate GERD symptoms altogether, said Colleen Webb at the Roberts Center for Inflammatory Bowel Disease at Weill Cornell. So this is somebody who's around people dealing with this a lot. If most patients with GERD went from taking a PPI once a day to coming off them entirely, about 60% would remain symptom-free for months, says Joel Rubenstein, a research scientist at the Ann Arbor Veterans Affairs Center for Clinical Management Research and director of the Barrett's Esophagus Program. Barrett's Esophagus we talked about, but not by name. I talked about the fact that sometimes when there is inflammation and the acid, that the esophageal cells can become more like intestinal cells, and that this can, in a very tiny percentage of people, actually lead to esophageal cancer, and that change in the esophagus is called Barrett's esophagus. One study found that 27% of long-term proton pump inhibitor drug users could discontinue them without any difficulties at all. Again, it is advised that you not just stop, because there can be rebound effects, but that you come off of them slowly. And there's several patterns for doing that. If you've been taking twice a day, go down to once a day, then once every other day, then once every 3 days. Or if you can cut your pill in half, take half the pill, take a quarter of the pill, come down off those drugs. Study after study has found that too many people are taking these drugs. The side effects are too severe for the benefit that most people are getting, and that they are not designed to be used on a daily basis the way people are using them. What else can you do? You can switch. You can switch to H2 agonists. Remember that in most of the things that we were saying that, the proton pump inhibitors did this, the H2 drugs didn't do those things. And the H2 drugs can relieve inflammation. I'm really driving home this point this month about how it is not a direct mechanical action of the acid on the esophagus that causes the problems, but underlying inflammation. And the H2 drugs, the previous class of drugs before the PPIs, far better at slowing down inflammation. We're going to look at some herbs that do that too. And many of the herbs that can be used to help eliminate and ease the symptoms of acid reflux and GERD can be used along with these drugs. Slippery elm, which I've talked about so many times here on Time Monk Radio because it is truly one of my favorite herbs, is absolutely safe to take with PPIs or H2 agonists or basically any other drugs that you want. One of the primary things that slippery elm does is to rebuild that mucus coat throughout the entire digestive system. So it really pumps up and plumps up those mucus cells in the stomach, protecting the stomach and helping the motility of the stomach. And it also soothes and heals cells in the esophagus. One of the reasons that is often given for the use of PPIs is that by turning off the acid in the stomach, it gives the esophagus a chance to heal. But it doesn't necessarily give the esophagus a chance to heal if the inflammation is still there. So slippery elm does it all. It counters the inflammation. It directly heals the esophagus, and it increases the motility, the movement, and how fast the food moves through the stomach. and is perfectly safe to use with these drugs if you still feel that you need them. Slippery elm certainly is an herb that is well worth considering if we're dealing with GERD, and so is licorice. Licorice literally inhibits the symptoms of GERD. Now, we want deglycerinated licorice, and since that is a mouthful, it's usually referred to as DGL. The glycyrrhizin that is in licorice causes water retention and hypertension. I will admit that this is one of the reasons why I basically don't use licorice. I don't like to be beholden to someone in a laboratory to make my herb usable for me. And since licorice itself has these side effects, I've just always used other things. But if I was taking a proton pump inhibitor because I had very bad symptoms of GERD, I would not be adverse at all to going out and buying DGL, deglycerinated licorice, because it inhibits the enzymes that help produce prostaglandins and leukotrienes. These are pro-inflammatory signaling molecules. DGL licorice without the glycyrrhizin also reduces the production of other inflammatory cytokines such as interleukins. So we had an herb that directly interferes with the inflammation that is the problem in GERD. Certainly, the pain and the discomfort is a problem as well, but there's lots of modifying herbs that we can use for that. The real thing that people are warned about, that are scared about, is, am I going to get esophageal cancer? And toward that end, people with GERD are encouraged to have an endoscopic examination of their esophagus, which can lead to hoarseness and pain as well for days afterwards. Not something that, again, is needed by everyone and far, far overused. Instead, we could be taking licorice, so long as we go out and buy DGL. Those who had GERD and took licorice had a 51% decrease in all of their symptoms versus 29% of the placebo takers. Similarly, they had a 55% decrease in dyspepsia versus 19% in the placebo group. And more than half of those in the study who took licorice, about 56%, still reported improvements 30 days later, and none of the placebo subjects, and of course, there are always going to be placebo subjects who do better on the placebo. None of the placebo subjects were still noticing that they felt better 30 days later. So licorice is not just dealing with the symptoms, it's getting down in there and really changing what's happening. DGL has been used in clinical trials to relieve gastrointestinal ulcers quite successfully and to counter pain from GERD. In China, cacao has been used to augment digestion, stop coughing. Remember, there's a connection between GERD and coughing, cool fire in the throat, and harmonize the effects of other substances. Again, licorice, especially the glycerinated licorice, is safe to take as you're tapering off these drugs. Licorice prevents liver injury from drugs. The usual amount of licorice DGL that's taken is 75 milligrams twice a day with water. Licorice also promotes mucus production and the growth of the cells which line and protect the stomach. So we have an herb that in many respects is really ideal for people with these kinds of symptoms and difficulties. But let's reel back a little bit and look at some lifestyle things as well, because not everybody is happy taking herbs, or some people have said to me, well, what's the difference if I take a pill or I take an herb? I still have to take something. Again, remembering that the licorice was used very much like the PPIs. It was used twice a day for 14 days, and then the effects lingered for up to a month. That was how long the study went on. Effects could possibly have lingered for far longer. What else can we do? There are certainly lifestyle modifications that ease up the symptoms of acid indigestion and GERD. The two most important ones are to lose weight and stop smoking. It's really exasperating that virtually every medical professional and so many medical conditions start out that the best thing to do is to lose weight, but don't exactly tell you how to lose that weight. And we also know that the vast majority of people who lose weight tend to put it back on again. Here's the good news, however. With many problems, we're beginning to see that if you can actually make that effort to lose a little bit of weight, 5 pounds or 10 pounds, even if you wind up putting it back on later, you have gotten the health-promoting effects of losing that weight. You'll have less GERD, you'll have less diabetes, you'll have less overall health problems if you can really do that. I know quite a few people who have found Weight Watchers to be incredibly supportive in that. You've heard me talk about my Fitbit because I'm very number-oriented, and it really gets me moving. My goal is to burn 2,000 calories a day. If I can burn 2,000 calories a day and my Fitbit will tell me if I'm doing that, then I figure that I do not have to worry about my weight because I am going to burn off just about everything that I eat, and that, of course, depends on the fact that I have a healthy and a wholesome diet. So whatever you do, however you do it, to lose a little bit of weight, if you are taking PPIs or if you're very bothered by GERD, could be a real gift to yourself. And similarly, quit smoking. I always liked a friend of mine who said quitting smoking tobacco was the easiest thing in the world. I've done it over 20 times. So, like with losing weight, stopping smoking tends to be something that we do, and then we get back, and then we do, and then we get back. But whatever time that you spend not smoking, and vaping is not a good substitute, I'm sure that we all know that now, will definitely reduce your acid indigestion symptoms. I personally find that the only times I have ever experienced anything like acid indigestion is when I have eaten food that I don't normally eat. And I pinpoint 3 primary things that seem to really do it. And unfortunately, these 3 things constitute a large amount of the standard American diet. And that is bad fat, refined white flour, and refined white sugar. Insofar as my diet doesn't contain these things, my digestion is absolutely fine and perfect, and I have worked with more than 1,000 different women who've come and lived with me as apprentices, some of whom have had very bad digestive problems. And again, eating a diet which contains only very good quality fats, organic butter, organic olive oil, and so on, and no refined carbohydrates, usually eliminates their digestive problems very, very quickly. So here's a list of things to eliminate or limit. I know, what a drag, but think about it, because limiting or eliminating these things doesn't just get you off the hook from the pain of the GERD. It really sets you up for a much healthier, happier life. Eliminate or limit bad fats, refined carbs, processed meat, coffee, even decaffeinated coffee, alcohol, hot pepper, curry, spicy foods, bell peppers, onions and garlic, carbonated drinks and sodas, citrus, peppermint, chocolate, artificial sweeteners, vinegar, ketchup, and barbecue sauce. Now let's go back over that list here. This is a list specifically designed for people who are dealing with GERD. All of us can eliminate or limit bad fats. All of us can eliminate or limit refined carbs. All of us can eliminate or limit processed meats. All of us can eliminate or limit carbonated drinks and sodas. All of us can eliminate or limit artificial sweeteners. The other things, you're going to want to have an individual decision on those things. Coffee, even decaf coffee, can be really hard on people with GERD, but coffee has tremendous health benefits, and we have talked about some of those benefits. Alcohol, especially with meals, can be very difficult for people with GERD, and many times it's a thing that needs to be removed from the diet to ease off that indigestion. On the other hand, we know that a glass of red wine, small amounts of alcohol, can actually have tremendous health-giving effects. Similarly, onions and garlic promote health. Chocolate is indeed a healthy thing, as is citrus. Bell peppers, hot peppers, curries, and spicy foods, of course, is one of my pet peeves. And I do think that these things lead to acid indigestion for most people. So give it a try. You'll certainly find lots of good press about bell peppers and hot peppers and all kinds of peppers and what great things they can do. You're not going to find that good press when it comes to talking about digestive upset and GERD, but in general, we're not saying that these are necessarily bad for you in the way that bad fats are, but that you might want to reconsider. I certainly find that for the vast majority of people dealing with acid reflux and GERD, getting the hot out of their diet is a lot easier than losing weight or stopping smoking, and has just as much effect. Peppermint and vinegar. Well, what can I say about these things? Peppermint is certainly one of the most digestive active herbs that we have, so much so that modern medicine is using tiny capsules of pure peppermint oil to help people with irritable bowel syndrome and other really severe problems in the gut. So I was amazed when I found over and over again people saying, oh, no peppermint if you have GERD or acid reflux. And, of course, then I also found herbalists who said, oh, that one of the best herbs for anybody who's dealing with acid reflux, of course, would be GERD. So what can we say? Maybe peppermint is not going to be right for you, and maybe peppermint will be right for you. Do eat more protein, though, and chew well and eat smaller meals. 3 or 4 meals, smaller, rather than 1 or 2 big meals is going to help. Remember, we want that motility. We want the food to move through the stomach, and those big meals, especially heavy meals, make it harder. Vinegar, ketchup, and barbecue sauce, well, I like them because they're great ways to get minerals. Remember that I'm not against that acid. They're frowned on for people with acid reflux because of the belief that acid leads to more acid in the stomach. That it may be so for certain individual people, but I don't think that it's a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. One of the best tips that I found for people who are bothered by acid reflux is after the meal, put a piece of gum, xylitol gum would be my choice, in your mouth and go for a walk. Chew gum and go for a walk. If you can chew gum and go for a walk, even for a little bit of time, it will really go a long way toward relieving your symptoms, and better if you can actually get out there and chew gum and go for a walk for a full hour after eating. Also, think about elevating the head of your bed, especially if you have more acid reflux whenever you lie down. Now, pillows are not going to do it because pillows are kind of soft and they actually kind of fold up the stomach and make the whole situation worse. You're going to need a foam wedge so that your body is really propped up, or even to put wooden blocks under the legs of your bed so that your whole bed slants. I have sometimes camped in situations like that where you think you're just going to roll right down the hill. And avoid tight-waisted clothes and belts and things like that. And allow at least a couple of hours between when you eat and when you lie down. All right. What kinds of other herbs besides slippery elm and licorice? I went to David Hoffman's great big book on clinical herbal medicine because I like the way he approaches things, and that is rather than just throwing plants at us, he tells us about the kinds of actions that we would want in the plants and why he's choosing those particular actions. So the treatment of GERD, he says in the vast majority of cases, lifestyle and dietary changes are effective, but we may also need herbs or drugs for some people. The actions indicated are demulcents to soothe and coat the esophagus and to insulate the mucosal lining against gastric contents. Anti-inflammatories. Remember, I have been leaning on how important the anti-inflammatories are. Vulneraries to aid the natural healing of any lesions in the esophagus. Astringents to tighten that sphincter. And David Hoffman does caution against using bitters because they stimulate secretion of stomach acid and the peristaltic activity of the digestive system. But again, I don't agree with him. I think that those are the perfect things to use. As a matter of fact, if somebody is complaining about acid reflux, the first herb that I often suggest for them, even before slippery elm, is dandelion. Tincture of dandelion root, 5 to 10 drops taken directly before meals. Well, this is kind of like taking the drug before meals. You don't really know how much help it's doing for you, but because there aren't any bad side effects to dandelion, it is a habit that you can indulge in if you need to at every meal for the rest of your life if you find that you don't have any symptoms if you take your dandelion tincture first thing. So I want to increase that acid. I want to increase the motility. So I think hooray for the bitters. Aloe vera, of course, is an herb that is frequently mentioned whenever there's digestive distress, and especially when there's pain. Aloe vera is very soothing. It's not a plant, however, that I feel comfortable or happy using internally, although I use it quite a bit externally. Partly, I don't use it internally because I was once in a situation where I slept in a child's bed and was infected with pinworms because of it. And in trying to cure myself of the pinworms, I tried a remedy in which I ate a small piece of aloe leaf. And I had such a vigorous emptying of my intestines that I actually thought my guts were being pulled out of me. I cannot imagine aloe being soothing or easing to anybody's gastrointestinal tract unless it has been done with in the lab and somebody has done things with it. And again, I'm not so happy having to use herbs that have had to be tinkered with in the labs. I'm much happier with yogurt. Yogurt, much better than probiotics, does significantly reduce bloating and flatulence, but not the pain of GERD. So eat your yogurt whenever you want to eat your yogurt because it certainly deals with the change in bacteria that taking drugs for this can occasion. And if you are taking the drugs, then do be very, very certain to eat your yogurt. I mentioned earlier on that we would talk a little bit about seaweed. Seaweed, especially the kelp seaweeds, which would be wakame and Nereocystis kelp and kombu, contain algins or alginates. There's a lot of discussion about whether or not eating seaweed is effective or not because it's unclear as to whether or not the seaweed is actually broken down enough by the body to get anything out of it. It does turn out that seaweed and the algains in seaweed can actually create kind of a mechanical, what is called a foam barrier in the stomach to actually prevent stomach contents from kicking back up toward the esophagus. So maybe the sushi eaters were on to something. Of course, that's not a lot of seaweed, that little bit of nori that it's wrapped in. If you have a problem, you might even want to consider carrying a little seaweed around with you in your pocket and chewing on it right after a meal to see if that does help you. Ginger, of course, is a very active herb and well recommended for all problems on the intestines. I would not take ginger if I was taking drugs. I would take only the soothing things. I would use something more like slippery elm or comfrey or marshmallow root or plantain, all of which are extremely soothing and healing and can be used as infusions or tinctures to help deal with healing the esophagus and countering the pain. David then creates a formula based on his actions indicated, the demulcent, anti-inflammatory, vulnerary, and astringent. And his prescription is 2 parts of marshmallow root, 1 part of calendula, and 1 part of chamomile. Interestingly enough, a great many herbal studies have found chamomile to be quite proficient at relieving the symptoms of acid reflux. Hooray for chamomile. He says that calendula is an astringent and a vulnerary healing agent, as well as an anti-inflammatory. So although I would think, it's the marshmallow and the chamomile that are the heavy hitters there, what David is pointing out is that the calendula is in fact one of the most important herbs in his formula. He suggests that you take marshmallow root and calendula tinctures 3 times a day, along with a cup of chamomile tea, or you can make a cold infusion of the marshmallow root. Lemon balm, which is a mint, of course, is one of those should we not. Caraway, anise, fennel, and coriander, the aromatic seeds, are always wonderful, wonderful friends to the digestive system. Again, remember that taking minerals and supplements generally is not going to work in a situation where there is problem in the digestive tract, especially if it's a problem with acid, because those things do need quite a bit of acid in the stomach in order to be effective. I hope that this offers you a way to improve your sensation of comfort, ease, and delight after every meal so that you can be well nourished and not have to worry about acid reflux or GERD. We're going to move on to the flu next week, and thank you so much for being with me. Thank you, Gemini. I, as always, am deeply grateful for this opportunity and this time.
Thank you, Susan. We feel the same here at Time Monk Radio. And this concludes part 75 of our series, The 7 Medicines the Wise Woman Way, with Susan Weed at Time Monk Radio.